Hello, everybody, and Merry Christmas. Yes, I know Christmas is fast approaching, which means, you know how they say in the movies sometimes, like, it's almost Christmas. Well, it really is here, December 23rd, the eve of Christmas Eve. So yes, welcome everyone as we gather together in this exciting time. Hope you like the decorations that I've put up. Yeah, I noticed that there were these light assets and this Santa hat asset, even though it looks a little weird when I turn my head. This was honestly the best I could get it looking. But you know what? I will take it. 'Tis the season. And yes, for everyone in the chat who showed up, welcome. So Apa, Tia Fair, Terraditto. Hello, Terraditto says, I'm quite curious about the answer to this. Oh, well. Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and around this time of year is when philosophers start debating it more, so it's always cool to see what answers have been proposed. This is my first time proposing an answer to it this year, so we will see what the answer is, or at least what my proposed answer is. Though, as always, you don't have to agree. I welcome any challenges that people might have. And then Tia says, I think today was the first day that Karis, you, and I all streamed, though Karis went unarchived and not as normal time. Truly a Christmas miracle. That is a very apt observation, Tia. I had not thought of that. But yes, I do believe that you are correct, that this is the first time we've all three streamed on the same day. Actually, I'm looking forward to what you will show us today. Oh, thank you, Apa. So jolly. I try, you know. I try with the jolliness. Join Karis and me wearing the default Santa hat. I know, it's so good. I love that VTuber Studio just has this, you know, in its assets. Nice decor. Thank you. That place seems high. Yeah, it is kind of high up, but, you know, sometimes, like, for just a place to go to during the holidays, this is like my, you know, secondary residence, and makes for a nice, nice change of scenery sometimes, you know. Just getting to venture out a bit during the holidays. Pro tip, I think it'd look better if you wore it higher up on your head and maybe made it a bit smaller. Okay, yeah, you might be right about that. Let's see if I can change it a little bit. Okay, so that's a little bit higher, and now it's a little bit smaller. Does that help at all? I don't know if that's what you had in mind, but anyway, that's at least an attempt to. Okay, I think that actually is looking a little bit better now. Yeah, that was a solid suggestion to you, so thank you. You truly are the master of Santa hats. On a similar note about the decor, you might notice that I have some Christmas lo-fi playing in the background. I hope it's not too loud, but if it is, let me know, and I can adjust the volume here in OBS. But with all that in mind, chat, the question that we face today is an age-old question when it comes to Christmas, which is the question of, is it okay to lie to kids, to lie to children about Santa Claus? To tell them that Santa's coming, that he's bringing presents, that he lives in the North Pole, that he has legions of elves making toys, when in fact, none of that, alas, is true. For those who are finding out this way for the first time, I am so sorry. I do not mean to traumatize anyone. But the question that it forces us to face is this okay? Should we be telling kids these things? Or would it be better if we just didn't sort of plunge kids into the whole Santa discourse, if we just kind of chose to forego all of that? And one thing that I think is cool about this debate is, like any philosophical debate, it has views on both sides, but also some fairly strong views. Like, some people seem to feel, relatively strongly about this, whereas there are others who maybe, don't feel quite as strongly or think like it's not a big deal either way. So really quite a broad spectrum of opinion on this issue, I would say, in multiple ways. Tia says, were you there when I was helping Karis put on his on Thursday? Oh, I don't think I was, but that sounds really funny. Might have to go back and see if I can check the VOD for that. Apa says, what do you mean? Oh, I'm sorry, Apa. I know. It's harsh sometimes. Reality can be harsh. But that is the reality we must face as philosophers. That is what we are called upon to do by the discipline of philosophy, is to face up to harsh truths. Which is not to say that I've ever been to the North Pole or anything. I mean, it could be, I suppose, that Santa is there for all I know, but as far as I know, no one has given definitive evidence of Santa's existence. So for today's stream, we shall be proceeding under the assumption, at least, that Santa is not real, that he's just a holiday make-believe tradition, sort of holiday pretend. But is it okay to tell children that Santa is in fact real? Like, is it okay to essentially lie to kids about this? What I would like to do today to explore that is to read to you all a post that I recently wrote about this. Stayed up very late last night writing this post because I wanted to make sure to get it out in time for Christmas, given the timeliness of it. And this is a post on my Substack, my IRL Substack. It's not a very long post. I don't think it should maybe take just about 10 minutes or so to read. So depending on how people feel about it, what questions or objections people raise, this might not be the longest stream today. That's okay. We'll just see how long we go. And the title of the post, you can see here, is "I'm lying to children about Santa." Why it puts you on the naughty list. So you can see there a hint of what my own view is going to be. And again, this was something that I wrote late last night / early this morning. I'm looking forward to seeing what people think about it. As always, any thoughts or questions or objections that you have on this, you should absolutely feel free to put in the chat. And after today's reading, we will have a little discussion of it. So yes, I'm lying to children about Santa. Well, actually, sorry, now that I'm seeing these lights, I feel like these lights might get a little distracting if I'm like having to trying to read this and the lights are like flashing. Let me just put this ahead. Okay, there we go. That's a little bit. Oh, but now we can't see chat. Are we gonna fix? Okay, there we go. Chat, I think I fixed it. Now we should be pretty much all set. He says he kept putting it off, so I DM'd him with an image of the file directory and told him to check it out on pain of death. Wow. On pain of death, and that coming from Justice herself. I can see how there was no way Karis could ignore that. But it says anything but the naughty list. I know, it's scary. But in my view, as long as you don't lie to kids about Santa, you will not be put on the naughty list. Or at least if you're on the naughty list, that will not be one of the reasons. So you can take some comfort in that. Oh, Yuavko, welcome. Once again, 3 a.m. Again, that is true commitment. So thank you, Yuavko. You're just in time, too. So I was just about to start reading today's post. Right, everyone, so get settled in, grab some eggnog, grab a blanket, settle in on the couch next to the fire, and we shall begin our reading together on Lying to Children About Santa, Why It Puts You on the Naughty List. Oh, and then I found this kind of somewhat ominous stock photo of a Santa hat for the top, so I was like, yes, this is the perfect image for today's blog post. I am so glad that I was able to find that one. Thank you, Mika Baumeister, for taking that stock photo and making it available to use for Substackers like me. Introduction. With Christmas fast approaching, philosophers everywhere are wondering an age-old question. Is it okay to lie to kids about Santa Claus? To tell them that Santa's coming, that he lives in the North Pole, that he's bringing them presents, when in fact, Santa doesn't exist. My starting point in thinking about this issue is to assume that lying is pro tanto morally wrong. That is, even if, as most would agree, there are some circumstances in which lying is justified. For example, when it's necessary to save someone's life, surely we ought to avoid lying if we can help it. Whatever the sources of the moral presumption against lying, whether it's a matter of failing to respect the other's autonomy, running the risk that the other will find out later and feel betrayed, or anything else, it seems fair to say that insofar as we lie to someone, there needs to be a justification in order for it to be morally permissible. In the case of lying to children about Santa, then, we face the question of whether there's a justification. If there's not, then lying to children about Santa is wrong, and we should stop doing it. To many or most people, lying to children about Santa doesn't feel wrong. It's the kind of lie that's apt to seem about as innocuous as a lie can get. So surely there must be a good justification for it. Here I'd like to consider the strongest justification I've heard, one proposed by Substack extraordinaire Amos Wolin. Wolin's defense of lying to kids about Santa. Wolin argues, oh, by the way, a side note on Amos Wolin is that he is a wonderful philosophy Substacker, very talented philosopher with a great sense of humor. So if you've never checked out his blog, his Substack, you should check it out. Wolin's defense of lying to kids about Santa. Wolin argues that lying to children about Santa is morally permissible on the grounds of retroactive consent. To illustrate, he gives an example involving a street magician. Suppose a street magician approaches a couple on the sidewalk and begins to perform a magic trick, one that begins with a small lie. For example, I was wondering if you could give me directions. Intuitively, there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with a lie like this, at least assuming that the magician knows the trick will likely blow the couple's mind, and that the lie is needed to make the trick as effective as it can be. Why might it be okay for the magician to lie to the couple in this way? Here's Wolin's proposal. The reason it's okay for David, the magician, to lie is that, assuming he knows his magic is good, he knows the pedestrians he's entertaining would probably retroactively consent to being lied to, since the lie enhanced the magic. And then, if that's right, it seems that we're only a short step away from applying this kind of justification to lies about Santa. Most people, so quoting Wolin here again, most people would retroactively consent to being lied to as a child about Santa. As a child. So I think that might have been a typo. Since believing in Santa Claus made Christmas more magical. As a result, lying about Santa is permissible. At least if you don't take things too far. Why I'm skeptical of Wolin's defense. As an initial comment, I quite like the appeal to retroactive consent as an explanation of why the street magician's lie is permissible. I, at any rate, can think of no better explanation there. It's less clear to me, however, that we can presume retroactive consent in the case of lying to children about Santa. I'd now like to explain the difference I see between the two cases. In the case of the magician, retroactive consent can be presumed because the deception is necessary to enhance the magic. Were there some other non-deceiving way of achieving the same effectiveness? And assuming that this non-deceiving way didn't have any countervailing costs of its own, the lie would be gratuitous, such that one could no longer presume that the people involved would retroactively consent to it. So far, so good. In the case of children and Santa, though, the deception is arguably not necessary to enhance the magic. Why not? How could one involve one's children in the fun of the Santa myth without, well, actually telling them that Santa's coming, along with various other things that entail Santa's existence? Here's what I envision. One can let one's child know, in certain moments, that all the Santa business is just pretend, but then go on playing the game of pretend all the same. For example, saying things like, "I wonder what Santa will bring you this year," and so on. By informing the child that Santa is make-believe, one importantly changes the context of one's subsequent first-order statements about Santa. Specifically, one makes it so that such statements are no longer assertions, but pretend assertions. Because one is only pretend asserting about Santa, one's statements about Santa will no longer be lies. It's a bit like announcing, "Okay, everyone, I'm going to pretend that my knee hurts. Ow, my knee hurts." Even if one's knee doesn't in fact hurt, one's statement to the contrary fails to count as a lie, since one has established the context necessary to make it merely a pretend assertion. But if one simply had one's children engage with the Santa myth in the mode of pretending, would it still create the same Christmas magic? I think that it would. Children are, after all, naturals at playing along with, and becoming fully invested in, stories and scenarios that they know aren't factual. For instance, a group of kids might together pretend that they're cats, or pirates, or Power Rangers. They don't, of course, believe that they're any of these things. If a kid who's pretending to be a cat decides to get a snack, he'll get a human snack, not cat food. If he has to go to the bathroom, he'll go to an actual bathroom, not the litter box. But for all that, they can remain fully invested in their play, often treating it with a seriousness greater than that which adults apply to real-life endeavors. Likewise for kids becoming deeply invested, even in scenarios that they're not playing out directly, such as a cartoon that they enjoy, but know doesn't depict real characters and events. I see little reason to think that things wouldn't play out the same way with Santa. And it's here that the case of Santa seems to me different from that of the street magician. If the magician told the people up front that he was simply pretending to need directions, surely that'd ruin the trick. Objections and responses. I'm not the first philosopher to have thought of this argument. As I was revising the draft of this post, I came across a post by philosopher J.P. Andrew, where he, in the concluding paragraph, more concisely touches on the points above. So that post was a case against Santa Claus, also a very good post that you should read if you're interested in these issues. Intriguingly, Andrew and Wolin later had a debate about this on YouTube. At one point, around 25 minutes, 43 seconds, Andrew brings up this same argument. Wolin raises a few points in response, the first of which is that even if children can still have fun with the Santa myth while engaging with it as make-believe, it's probably not as much fun as they'd have if they outright believed it. For an analogy, Wolin points to experiencing Christian art as a Christian as opposed to a non-Christian. While a non-Christian can certainly appreciate Christian art for its aesthetic and cultural significance, there's arguably a yet deeper, more enjoyable, or more transcendent experience of it that's made possible by believing that the art in fact depicts the all-powerful, all-good creator's plan for humanity and for the universe. Wolin's objection is a tough one, and I'm afraid I can't offer a decisive response to it. But I will say that it's unclear to me whether believing in Santa, as opposed to merely pretending, really would make a difference to children's enjoyment of Christmas. For one thing, belief or no belief in Santa, kids would still be able to look forward to receiving presents. And they still wouldn't know what they're getting, unless their parents or other relatives tell them. So the element of unpredictability would still be there. Likewise for most, if not all, of the other elements that make Christmas enjoyable. Spending time with family, singing Christmas songs, baking Christmas cookies, and so on. But perhaps a more significant point is that children's capacity to have fun with something often seems as if it's determined more or less entirely by their imaginative engagement with it, and not much, if at all, by belief. I'm thinking, for instance, of kids having a blast singing along and dancing to Baby Shark, or We're Going on a Bear Hunt. When doing so, the kids clearly don't believe that they're being chased by a shark or a bear. If they did, they'd be terrified rather than enjoying themselves. And crucially, despite their evident lack of belief in the scenarios they're playing out, it often seems as if the kids couldn't be any more invested in the make-believe or having any more fun with it than they already are. Looking back too on my own experiences, both of being a kid and of observing kids, probably the most fun and creatively engaged moments that I've ever seen kids experience have been moments centered on make-believe, such as performing skits or playing pretend. One thing I think we can say here then is that even if engaging with the Santa myth merely in the mode of pretend is less fun for kids than outright believing it, the difference in fun is probably extremely small, and not enough to suggest retroactive consent to being lied to about Santa. A further objection Wolin raises is that by raising one's child to engage with Santa as make-believe, one runs the risk that she'll tell other kids that Santa isn't real, and that this could lead to various problems, such as ruining the experience for other kids, causing heated arguments, and, even if only temporarily, losing friends. It seems to me, though, that such a scenario is unlikely. If your kid is being raised to appreciate and engage with the Santa story, even as only pretend, then it'd be surprising if she confronted other kids about Santa's non-existence in an abrasive or tension-causing way. It seems more likely that, to the extent that she brought up Santa's non-existence around other kids at all, rather than just assuming that those other kids were already engaging with the Santa story in the mode of pretending, as her family has been, it'd be to encourage them to engage with the Santa story in a similarly pretending mode, a mode that is likely to seem less threatening than doing away with the Santa story entirely. To the extent that any arguments did arise, it seems unlikely that they'd be any more heated than other things kids argue about, like whose dad could beat up whom, or whether Goku or Peppa Pig would win in a fight, and so on. Conclusion. If I'm right about all this, then whatever benefits there are to telling kids about Santa can be procured largely, if not entirely, by inviting kids to engage with the story in the mode of make-believe. Lying to kids about it simply isn't needed. And this, in turn, seems to undermine the basis for presuming kids' retroactive consent to being lied to about Santa. My view, then, is that the present justification for lying to children about Santa doesn't ultimately succeed, and that, given the presumptive wrongness of lying, we should refrain from lying to children about Santa, at least until a more successful justification comes along, if one ever does. P.S. This is probably my final post of the year. Merry Christmas to all, and a Happy New Year as well. So thank you for listening to that and reading that with me, everyone. So now I shall take my place back. As always, I'm curious to hear people's thoughts, people's questions, people's objections on any of this. Oh, and sorry, I always forget to do this, but in case anybody is curious to see the link to that, if they would like to just have it on hand for themselves, kind of just to follow along, I have just posted it in the chat, and I'll make it a pinned comment. So that way you can now easily see it. Read the comment I left you. Okay. Yeah, let's take a look. In fact, I know I've missed quite a few of the comments since I was reading. Let's see, where did I leave off? Going AWOL fire blog name. It is, yeah, that's the kind of name, the kind of pun that Amos is really good at. I think this is quite the easy thing to solve for a utilitarian, Uevko says. Perhaps, I mean, I guess there's a sense in which the answer is easy on a theoretical level. One could just say, well, look, does lying to kids about Santa make them happier? Does it create more happiness in the world? And if it does, then we should. And if not, then it's not the case that we should. I suppose empirically it might be a little trickier to investigate whether people are happier as a result of being lied to about Santa. Though I do know there is some work on this. Oh, Tia says on Substack. Sorry. Okay, no, I mean on Substack. Okay, well, let's take a look. Because I guess, yeah, that comment, since that's on the post, like that is part of the lore of the post, if you will. So I'll go ahead and read that, and yeah, that can be a part of it too. Tia says, I'm of a similar mind as you, Harry. Ooh, Harry, wonder who that could be. Sounds like a cool guy. To me, lying to children about Santa comes across as rather patronizing to their intelligence, when many children can and are able to see through the ruse. I agree wholeheartedly with the argument that lying is unnecessary for making Christmas enjoyable compared to the more palpable elements of Christmas, such as food, gifts, and parental affection. Also, lol at the whose dad could be a poombit. If the fight were gaming based, you could probably win against 99% of other dads, so there's that. Oh, thank you, Tia. What about you, Harry? Did you ever believe in Santa? Personally, I didn't. My guess is that neither did you, and that a philosopher's skeptical streak begins early. In any case, cool write-up, and if you turn this into an Axaeon stream as you said you would, I'll be sure to tune in. Thanks, Tia. Yeah, I really do appreciate that comment. It's very nice. And just to give sort of a comprehensive picture to chat of the discussion, I'll go ahead and read my response to it. Thanks for the kind words, Tia. On your question of whether I ever believed in Santa, it's a little difficult to say for sure, but I suppose I probably did. I was pretty trusting of adults. It wasn't till later, during my teen years, that I came to embrace a more skeptical disposition. To be clear, though, this isn't to suggest that I believed in Santa up till my teens. Haha. Yeah, I think as a kid, I was always pretty inclined to just, trust whatever adults told me. Because I didn't really get into philosophy until I was around high school, I would say. I do like to think, though, that even before, maybe I had, some inkling of it, but I didn't actually start getting serious about it until I was a bit older. Also, Tia, I noticed your earlier comment just now. You say, can I just say I love how debating lying to kids about Santa is serious business for Substack philosophers on par with any other ethical debate. Yes, that is one of the wonderful things about Philosophy Substack. There is no debate that we are not willing to plunge into. There have been more ridiculous topics in academic philosophy. Don't worry. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement, Yuavko. Tia says, lol, a YouTube debate. Okay, you know what? I'm going to like to press on this a little more, because I can understand the reaction of okay, it is kind of funny, calling it a YouTube debate, but just what is funny about it? Why is that so funny? maybe it's just the sort of unusualness of it. I know, like, when we think of philosophers debating each other, we think of, like, you know, perhaps two people on a stage at like some university somewhere, but here it's just like on YouTube. I wonder if there's anything more to the humor though. But personally, I will say I'm a big fan of YouTube debates. Yoavko says, metaphysics of farts, metaphysics of rooms. There's a view about the epistemological role of male genitalia. Not sure I've come across that paper. I'll have to put that next on my reading list. Can't say that's a subject that I've thought about much before, but somehow it does not surprise me too much to know that that philosophers have devoted some attention to it. Oh, by Kane B, one of the greatest Philly YouTube channels. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with Kane B's videos, but I know I have heard of him, and that he's one of the really the ones who's taken it really far in terms of advancing philosophy on YouTube. Tia says, my objection to Wolin's point there is religion is not the same as lying about Santa. They're on different levels of significance, and the former is categorically faith, not a lie. So I might have forgotten which point exactly that was in response to from Wolin, but yeah, when it comes to religion, like, even if religion is false, like let's say that Christianity in this case is false, it does absolutely seem right to say that, like, parents who tell their kids that Jesus loves them are not lying to their kids, because a lie is only a lie if you know that it's false and if you're, you know, intending to deceive. Whereas in the case of religion, again, on the assumption that Christianity is false, it would simply be parents who are sincerely mistaken about what they're telling their kids. So that seems right. I'm not sure if the thought is like that Wolin ever suggested anything to the contrary. If so, you can clarify, Tia. But yeah, like, as far as the point itself goes, I think that what you're saying there makes perfect sense. UFCO says, gotta say, this time I do like Axaeon's argument much more, but they should have sourced better empirical evidence. For claims like paraphrase, it will be as effective in what senses, where the metrics, just the fun. Maybe we want to teach them certain lessons. When it's clear, it's pretend. Well, thank you for the comment, Yoavko. I do agree that for this one, it is stepping a bit more into empirical matters than perhaps most of my posts. And unfortunately, when it comes to a question like this, there is fairly limited empirical data on it, I would say. Not that it's something I've looked into a bunch, but if you're curious to follow up on some of the empirical data on this, Wolin's post actually does go into some of it. He describes a few studies that have been done on whether people who were lied to about Santa as a kid wish that they hadn't been lied to about Santa, and also like whether they went on to lie about Santa to their kids. Apparently the data is generally pretty friendly to those who support lying to Santa, or sorry, not lying to Santa, lying to kids about Santa. Like, most people who were lied to about Santa as kids don't have a particularly negative view of it, and, like, you know, plan to or have gone on to lie to their own kids about Santa. So I can see how that might pose a certain challenge maybe to some of my points. Like, maybe one could use that to suggest, like, perhaps retroactive consent can be presumed, like, even if the lying was not strictly necessary for the fun. But at the same time, there are some people who wish that they hadn't been lied to about Santa, so there is somewhat of a risk. But in my view, if it is indeed true that the evidence, incomplete as it may be, suggests that the lie is not necessary to the fun, then my view is, just given the general moral presumption against lying, I think that we should err on the side of avoiding lying to kids and just engage in the mode of pretend and the mode of make-believe. Teradito says, I think lying about Santa is good because it keeps alive the topics of whimsy, fantasy, the child-only experience, and the morals of telling disappointing things to kids. Yeah, that's an interesting comment too. When it comes to the morals of telling disappointing things to kids, I suppose my view is, if one is open with one's kids about it from the very beginning, like there's never a lie to them about Santa in the first place, like it's always made clear, like, hey, this is just pretend, then I would say it seems to me there probably wouldn't be much, if any, disappointment on the kids' part. I think that if there's like an initial lie about it, but then like only later do they reveal the truth, like it's possible that there's some disappointment there. So that's part of the reason why I would be in favor of just like being upfront with kids about it from the very beginning. And then on the point about keeping alive the topics of whimsy, fantasy, a child-only experience. Yeah, I suppose my view is that all those things could be kept alive without lying to the kids. I think that one could keep that sense of fantasy and that sense of imaginative engagement and whimsy. One could have all that, it seems to me, just by engaging with the Santa myth in the mode of pretending. Like, hey, let's play along with this. Isn't this like a fun and cool story to kind of play along with? And I think in general, kids would be up for that, and that the magic of Christmas could be preserved that way. But of course, I could be mistaken. Yovko says, one could probably easily argue that the potential damage from this could outweigh the minimal change in benefits we get from being clear about it being pretend. Yeah, that seems plausible to me too. Like, insofar as there are any benefits to lying about it rather than just pretending, it seems to me that they are smaller than the potential feelings of disappointment or betrayal upon discovering the truth. Goku mention. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, this might be the first post where I've had a Goku mention. I've been able to incorporate a mention of him, but it felt pretty natural there. And then, oh, I see you, Abko, you touched on a similar point later with your comment. We can arguably keep that without keeping the actual tradition alive. Or at least if the actual tradition there refers to lying to kids about Santa, then yes, I would agree. Puss says, I wonder what the utilitarianism view of this would be, though. You could argue kids making good deeds in order to not be in the naughty list is a win-win, but I don't know. Yeah, when it comes to like the naughty list and like, yeah, how does Santa influence kids' behavior? I think that is also an intriguing question. Perhaps if they were just engaging with it as sort of a pretend, sort of make-believe story, maybe that could be enough. Or although I guess I could see an argument that like for that element, maybe actually like believing that they'll be put on the naughty list provides some motivation for not doing naughty things. I can't help wondering though if like that's really a kind of motivation that we should be encouraging in kids. Maybe this is just idealistic of me, but there's a part of me that wants to say like, look, shouldn't kids' motivation to do good things and be kind to others come not from like a fear of being put on the naughty list if they don't do those things, but just because they see like the intrinsic value of doing those things. They see like, oh yeah, like other people matter, other people's needs matter, other people's feelings matter, and you know, that's why I should respect other people in my actions. Or maybe that's expecting too much of kids too, to engage with others in that way or from those motivations. But I'm inclined to think that it's not. I think that it is generally possible for kids to embrace that. Yovko says, in response to APA, make empirical tests to see how much hurt it causes to people and how much it improves their lives. Yeah, I suppose that's the way we'd have to go if we're taking sort of the utilitarian approach to figuring this one out. See, I'm famous? For sure, yep. Your comment is now there, frozen in time, there for everyone to see. Maybe a bit hard to measure, but surely not impossible to get a good rough estimate to make a good decision. Yeah, I think that if we're going, yeah, utilitarian or even just more broadly consequentialist on a lot of these things, then that seems to be a general pattern, is measuring the consequences or the relevant consequences can be tough to do precisely, but often it is possible to make at least, you know, a reasonable estimate. Revco says, I was brought up agnostic. About the Tooth Fairy, I did play pretend, and it seemingly went great if I remember correctly. Okay, that's an interesting data point. Yeah, I hadn't thought much of like other childhood myths like the Tooth Fairy in connection to this, but it's good to know that it went well for you, even with just engaging with it as make-believe. Oh, back on the YouTube debates, let's see, Tia says, it's funny because YouTube debate is a step up in terms of commitment from Substack. And the thing that Führer is being summoned for is still lying about Santa Claus. I wonder, why is it a step up in terms of commitment from Substack? Oh, is it because doing a YouTube debate with someone is a live context and you have to like think of your responses on the fly, and that makes it more intimidating, like just a scarier experience? Because if that's the thought, then I actually can very much agree with that. I think that live debates do take a certain courage to engage in. Not to say that written debates don't, but I think with written debates, the fact that you have time to, you know, craft your responses and think about, you know, how you're going to engage with the other's objections, to me at least, that does make them a bit less nerve-wracking than something like a YouTube debate. There's also Amos Roll and VTuber debut win. It's funny you bring that up. He would be a good VTuber, I think. Because I've talked with him before, and just his overall, you know, personality and interest and everything. I think that he would be a very good one. He says, I was objecting to his argument that lying is justified because without it there'd be less magic. And he equates it to the effect on Christians if Christmas had the Christian effect elements taken out of it. Oh, I see. Yeah, I think there, if I'm remembering his argument correctly, he was referring to, I think, Christian art, which I suppose some of it could be Christmas type art, like art of the Nativity and so on. Although I'm not sure if it was limited to that. I think it might have been perhaps meant a bit more generally, and that if, I think his point was that if you actually believe in Christianity, then perhaps that unlocks the potential for a sort of deeper, more enjoyable experience of Christian art than if you are a non-believer. Which, as far as that point goes on the Christian art, like, that seems like a pretty plausible point to me. But I do question whether that point is analogous to the case of kids enjoying Christmas and kids, you know, enjoying the Santa myth, which I find to be a false equivalence. I see. Ravko says, one potential thing you may miss is a sense of wonder and curiosity instilled. Perhaps, like, if the thought there is, like, if we just have kids sort of pretend about Santa and not believe in Santa, like, maybe they miss out on some of the wonder and curiosity. Perhaps that's true, but I would doubt it. I think that wonder and curiosity seem very often just as present in the things that kids imagine, even when the kids know it's not real. Like, they can still have that same wonder and curiosity when they're, like, reading a fantasy book that they enjoy, or, you know, watching a cartoon, or pretending that they're a cat or a wizard or like a pirate. So that inclines me to be at least somewhat hopeful that the same could be true when it comes to engaging with Santa. Teradito says, if we tell kids Santa doesn't exist, the question of telling kids about Santa wouldn't exist. I think that's disappointing too. Though I guess a Santa-less Christmas is as magical as Halloween. And Halloween can be pretty magical. So yeah, maybe that's an interesting comparison. Perhaps, yeah, comparing it to Halloween. But I want to go back to the first part of what you said, Teradito. If we tell kids Santa doesn't exist, the question of telling kids about Santa wouldn't exist. I think that's disappointing too. So is the thought here that, like, this is just such an interesting philosophical debate, like whether we should lie to kids about Santa, that you would be sad to see this debate go? And like, if we all like just agreed, like, okay, no more lying to kids about Santa, then like no one would be having this debate, and like that would be a sad thing. Because if so, that's I mean, I'm not laughing and I'm laughing at appreciation that that you find the debate interesting, and I find it interesting too. I suppose there is always that potential for, like, anytime a debate gets resolved or people all like agree to go a certain way and there's no longer the debate about it, yeah, I suppose something is lost, because there's always the enjoyment of just the debate itself. So I'm trying to think of, like, what is there any consolation that one could offer for that kind of circumstance. I suppose the most I can say here is just to point out that there are plenty more debates, interesting, worthwhile debates to be had, and perhaps even so many that we could never, fully address them all. So maybe it's not such a huge deal if one of the debates gets settled. Maybe we'll have an infinitely replenishing store of further interesting debates to be had. At least that's my hope for when it comes to philosophy. Of course, maybe there was a way to replace even that without a lie. Yeah, I would hope so. I think that with the sort of pretend element, I like to think that that could replace it. Tia says, I have a couple more objections/expansions on my previous points against the pro-lying view. Okay, yeah, no, I'd be curious to hear them. Absolutely feel free to put them in the chat. It says, yeah, that sounds valid, to be honest. Okay. Thank you, Apa. I'm not sure if that's referring to me or the commenters in the chat, but in any case, thank you for the thought. Tia says, I had a similar thought. Yeah, justice is most meaningful when motivated intrinsically and is best taught from a young age. That's a nice way of putting it. My further thoughts, I can't help but object to the pro-lie view on the basis that I suspect it hinges on ageism. It is a certain cultural view we have of children. Oh, to you, you made a valid point earlier. Okay. Thank you, Apa. Yeah, maybe I need to revise my comment reading practice, because I know, like, sometimes when I start, like, at the very beginning of all the comments that I missed and go down, like, by the time I get to the end, it's like I've missed out on the context. Maybe skipping back and forth just to make sure I keep the context in mind would be best. Perhaps that's a skill I shall work on in future streams. But yeah, on your comment, Tia, let's see, on the ageism, yeah, certain cultural view, we have children. I know that's just the first comment in a thread, and you're probably writing the other one right now. So I'll go ahead and let you write that. But as you're writing it, I will say that, yeah, I think anytime the justification someone proposes for treating someone a certain way refers simply to that person's age, when, like, treating someone a certain way would not be okay in normal circumstances, but someone says, oh, well, like, it's okay because, like, they're just a kid, for example, like, therefore we can tell them these lies, like, we can do these things. Yeah, like to me, that does raise immediate red flags, and I'm inclined to think that there is ageism going on in those cases as well. Seems to me like the age alone should never be the sole justification that we have in cases like that. One would have to be able to point to some further factor. Could perhaps be a factor that's correlated with age, but yeah, the age itself would never be a good justification, in my view. I have a hard time imagining that would be just as okay with systematically lying to adults in a similar manner. Okay, yeah, that's, I think our thoughts on this seem very much aligned. That, yeah, like, it seems to me if something like telling a lie to someone would not be okay to do to an adult, then I think our presumption should be that it's not okay to do to a kid. Is justice best taught from a young age? That doesn't seem immediately clear to me. I like to think that it's best taught from a young age. Now, true, maybe kids will not quite be able to immediately understand the very in-depth recherche elements of justice or theories of justice and so on. Like, if you put a dense, academic tome in front of them on what justice is, like, that's probably not the best approach to teaching them about justice. But I think even young kids can often or typically understand kind of basic scenarios that involve justice. Scenarios that involve, like, people, being treated fairly or unfairly. Like, for instance, little Timmy, so I'm trying to think of, like, a really solid example for this. like each kid in the class was given one cookie. When Sally wasn't looking, little Timmy took Sally's cookie. Like, what's wrong with that? Like, is that fair? Like, I think kids could understand, like, hey, that's not fair. You know, there's something unjust going on in a case like that. So, and I think it's valuable for kids to learn about things like fairness and proper treatment and all of that. So, when it comes to learning about sort of some of those basics of justice, I absolutely think that that's a good thing for kids to start early on. Mm-hmm. On a different note, I'm concerned that the whole Santa fanfare could distract from where a child's gratitude for their gifts, etc. should lie. Their parents and other loved ones. Yeah, that's an interesting objection too, Tia. And this is one that I believe Amos Wolin considers, at least briefly, near the end of his post. So if you want to see what he says on that, then the link that I shared to his post has a little bit more on that. I believe his response is that that kids' gratitude could still be directed at like the people responsible. Like it could still be directed, at least generally, at, you know, parents and loved ones, and that just having like a few gifts marked out as like from Santa wouldn't have any obvious, at least not like any major impact on like misdirecting the kids' gratitude. I suppose you could say maybe even like a slight misdirection of their gratitude is perhaps not ideal. But I think that's at least one point Wolin might raise in his defense. If there is a relevant difference that justifies it, then it's not ageism, in my opinion. Women getting breaks for pregnancies and such makes total sense. It would not be sexist to do so because it's relevant. You need to show there is no relevant difference here. So yeah, on that point, Yuavko, I absolutely agree that like if there's a relevant difference in whatever case is being described, then yeah, just automatically it's not ageism. That seems right. On the point that you need to show there is no relevant difference here, what I would want to say is I think someone who is proposing that two groups of people be treated differently, I think the burden is on them to show that there is a relevant difference. I think otherwise our presumption should just be equal treatment. In other words, I don't think the burden is on the person who favors equal treatment to show that there's no relevant difference. It seems to me that like that's a safe default, and the burden should be on the one who is proposing that like it's okay to do things to one group of people that would not be okay to do to another group of people. I think the burden is very much on them to show that those relevant differences are there. But other than that, I think I would very much agree with your comment. Tia says, IDK, if I'm wording this well, I can expand / rephrase. If not, yeah, I mean, so far it doesn't seem to me that your wording has been unclear. I don't think there's a relevant difference, Yuavko. You'd have to explain why it's okay to trick kids and not adults. In my opinion, it's not. Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Or at least, yeah, it seems to me like the sort of default assumption should be in favor of treating people equally, and we should revise that only if we have reason to suspect that there is a relevant difference. Of course, I think the burden is on both sides. I don't think the burden should only be on the side who needs to say there is a relevant difference. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like here we might just have kind of a bedrock difference in intuition. I'm not sure if anything further can be said to motivate the view. Oh, it looks like you have some follow-up comments here. There's a difference between claiming you just don't accept the other side versus rejecting it. Rejecting it requires a burden too. So yeah, on that, I mean, I would say if I'm claiming that someone's view is false, rather than just suspending judgment, then I should have a reason for thinking it's false. So, like, if that's all the point amounts to, then yes, that sounds fair to me. If the question is, because earlier it seemed to me we were thinking of it in terms of, like, how to go about treating people. And my thought there was that if a certain, like, if we know a certain form of treatment, like, is not okay for people in general, like lying to people, for example. It seems to me like our default should be just to suppose that when it comes to like another group of people, like in this case kids, that it's probably not okay to treat that other group of people in that way, to lie to the other group of people. Like that just seems like the sort of default plausible starting point. And I think anyone who like if somebody asks, well, like why think that like it's not okay to lie to kids, I suppose my view would be like, even if one hasn't thought about it in depth, probably just one could assume that whatever reasons make it not okay to lie to adults would likely apply to the case of kids as well. But yeah, I mean, I do think that if one is going to, like I did in the post, say, no, like it's definitely like not okay to lie to kids, like here's why, then yeah, one should be able to provide evidence for that. Pterodito says, I think a parent expecting gratitude from their gifts is less wholesome. The myth of Santa making them gift without such expectation sounds more noble to me. I don't know if I've considered that point before. But yeah, if we're looking at it from the parents' angle, then perhaps there's a certain selflessness in marking their gift as from Santa, knowing that the kid's gratitude is going to go to Santa rather than them. It's an interesting point. Ufko says, I think most people's intuitions from my surroundings, from how it seems like to me, align with there being a relevant difference that makes it worse to lie to adults. Yeah, I think that when it comes to Santa, at least, that seems fair. Like most people don't seem to think there's much issue with lying to kids about Santa. So yeah, that probably is the common opinion on that one. Tia says, I think kids should grow up knowing their parents toil to provide for them if that is the reality, so they don't take it for granted. Might be just a personal view of mine, though. Yeah, I think that with this one, what I would say is that if parents, maybe like the parents, should be honest with the kids and everything, and like I don't even have an objection to like parents marking a gift as from Santa, just as long as they've made clear to the kids like, hey, this is all just pretend. But yeah, I like the point about how like if the parents are open about how the gifts come from them, maybe that helps the kids not take it for granted. Though I suppose the age might make somewhat of a difference here too. Like if it's a really young kid, they might not understand that the parents like have to go to work or like all that's involved in working to provide the gifts. But I suppose they could still understand like that the parent, at least like in some sense, procured the gift for them. And maybe that's all that would be needed for the parents' gratitude. So yeah, that point about the kids not taking it for granted is, I think, an interesting point. Ufko says, if burden of proof is just based on the usually accepted side, then you need to show there is no relevant difference. Oh, like the usually accepted side in this case, and in terms of like what people usually think about Santa, or like what people usually think about like whether lying is okay to someone or not. See, there were some follow-ups on that. Pterodito says, I think lying to adults is just harder, to be honest. An extreme that just sounds like religions. Well, see, one thing that would make it harder, I guess, to lie to adults is like if the lie is not well constructed, you're probably going to get called out for it or caught in the lie in a way that you might not if the target is just the kid. So maybe that's one reason why people are generally more comfortable lying to kids than to adults. Tia says, I disagree. I cite the word ageism because there is a cultural belief that exaggerates the intellectual gap between children and adults, and this has harmful outcomes. We don't talk about this enough. Yeah, I think I'm also inclined to agree with that. I think that sometimes when it comes to children's reasoning abilities, people will assume like, oh, they're just kids, like they can't reason at all. When, like, in fact, the kids can reason. It's just that they haven't built up a great deal of knowledge about the world. They don't have a lot of knowledge, a lot of facts in their minds, like about how the world works. But yeah, it does seem right to me that we generally underestimate kids' reasoning abilities. But yeah, I'm not sure if there will be, like, where the debate's going to go from here. Because as far as I know, my post is the most recent one on Substack about this issue. But, like, there's surely going to be more. Like, I am not the last philosopher who is going to be writing about this. So I look forward to seeing, like, how further philosophers, or how other philosophers will kind of further the debate. Some of that might have to wait until future Christmases, but it is a debate that will surely rage on. Yuavko says, in general, it seems it may be worse to lie to children compared with adults, because they are more susceptible. Yeah, I guess if we're thinking in terms of the damage a lie might do, in terms of like how much it might influence someone's thinking, like in terms of how much their thinking might be sort of corrupted, so to speak, by being lied to, then yeah, children, I think in general, are more trusting than adults. And so, like, if you tell them a lie, even if it is a lie that will strike an adult as like a pretty crazy or far out lie, then yeah, a kid's more likely to believe that kind of lie than an adult is. So that could be one reason that might actually make it worse to lie to kids than to adults. T says, I'm not surprised you're in agreement as a professional educator. What errors children make that people attribute to stupidity are often the result of lack of knowledge / life experience. Yeah, no, I think that's entirely true, and I wish more people were aware of that. There is another Substacker that I really like who's done a lot of good work on this. If anyone is curious to follow him or to kind of see his work, I'm just going to post a link to his Substack, and his name is Peter Gray. He is a psychologist who's done a lot of work on education, and the title of his Substack is Play Makes Us Human. So for anyone who wants to kind of follow up and read a little bit more on the abilities of young kids and education and things like that, you might enjoy his Substack. Then Yuavko says, on the other hand, it seems the lie about Santa Claus is kind of different in that surely they are going to understand it is a lie. At least eventually. Well, one hopes that that will be the eventual outcome. Yeah, it seems unlikely that somebody who's lied to about Santa will go on their whole life believing in it. So maybe that, to some extent, limits the damage of the lie. Though I'd be inclined to say that even just like the temporary deception seems like pro tanto bad, and that we should avoid it if we can. Not that you might not disagree. I'm not making any presumptions there about what your view is, but that would just be my view of that. Stupidity and intelligence terms in general is a stupid term. Oh, I wonder why you think that. I mean, it's generally, I try to avoid using words like stupid in general because I think that those can be very emotive words and can be very, strong words, can make people feel like they're being attacked. But nevertheless, are there not some contexts in which the word is fitting? Like if someone is behaving in a really counterproductive way and like they should know better. I mean, it seems to me that there are at least some cases where it's fair to describe something as stupid. Though again, for most practical purposes, I suppose I will admit it is a term I try to avoid using. But I think here in a moment, chat, I shall probably head out. And later tonight, if you're curious, one thing that I need to do is wrap some Christmas gifts. Yep, and write some Christmas cards. Because this year I did not get an early start on it. That is still something that I have to do. Fortunately, I have done all my Christmas shopping. Have you done all your Christmas shopping, chat? Or will tomorrow be a last-minute shopping day for you? But yes, I think that that is something I'm going to do later tonight, is doing the wrapping and the Christmas card writing. Because there are some contexts in which it is fine, but discerning that is part of the problem. It's too hard, I think, more than people may recognize. Okay, yeah, I think a reasonable point there, that it can be tricky to tell exactly when it's okay to use terms like that. And it does seem right to me to say like terms like that are overused. Like if we had less of, people calling each other stupid, then that would almost certainly be a better state of affairs than we have at present. But again, with that, I think I will end today's stream pretty soon. Again, kind of a shorter stream than normal today. Partly because I know like people are, planning for Christmas and probably have their own Christmas plans and agendas that they need to get to. So I don't want to keep you all too long on today's stream. But it has been fun. I've enjoyed the discussion with everyone. I've enjoyed getting to see what you all think about whether it's okay to lie to kids about Santa. Tia says, just want to say this was a fun stream, even if a small one. Just shows the power of debating even seemingly frivolous topics philosophically. Oh, thanks, Tia. It's always been one of my favorite things about philosophy is how it can be applied to just about anything. And yeah, I do think that this is a good example of how there can be, ethical debates about things we might not have expected. Yeah, of course, this T, I did talk with a friend who independently brought up the ageism topic. Okay. Yeah, these are topics that I think can come up pretty naturally with a lot of the discussions around all this. Oh, and then there's a follow-up there, and they did give an argument for why there is no relevant difference. At least they argued that the claimed relevant differences people claim are either wrong or irrelevant. I see. Apa says, thank you for the stream. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you for tuning in. And by the way, if I'm mispronouncing your name, let me know. It looks like Apa, but I could be wrong. So if I'm getting it wrong, please let me know, and I will endeavor to correct myself. Tia says, good luck with your Christmas prep, X-Senpai, and enjoy your holidays. Oh, trust me, I will. I like the holidays a lot. It's always good to see family and just, things like being alive and all that, Like, it's great, So it should be a good time for everybody. Teradido says, it's a great discussion. Would be a shame if it disappeared. Well, thank you, Teradido. I was glad to have you here for it. And yeah, this discussion, like both the blog post and the VOD, will always be up here. So anytime anyone wants to revisit or think about these things again, then it'll always be there for you. Ipa says, it doesn't mean anything. You could bounce it whoever you want. Okay. Well, that's a relief to know. So thank you, Ipa. Yeah. All right, everyone. Thanks again for a fun stream. And favorite festive activity being alive. Yep. And I hope that you all have a wonderful Christmas or whatever holiday you celebrate. I hope that you will celebrate it by being alive, just as you've noted, Tia. Yeah, my favorite part of the holidays, being alive indeed. And yeah, I will probably not stream so much later this week, but maybe this weekend. I still have to decide. But in any case, have a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Goodbye, everybody.